This Earth's history is coming to a close. The Bible foretells the great events that will pass just before Christ's return. Earthquakes, famines, wars. The signs are clear. In the face of these events, it's important to have a firm understanding of God's true character. But much of this has been lost, forgotten and replaced by other doctrines and traditions.
The Antichrist Beast has given the world a wrong picture of what God is like, and salvation comes from knowing Him.
Many may be surprised how simply and clearly the Bible really speaks.
God will set up His kingdom very soon, and right now we have opportunity to be making intelligent choices and heartfelt choices as to which side we will be on.
From creation to revelation, Pastor Rester presents the plain truth from God's Word.
Our topic today, Antichrist exposed. Our topic today, Antichrist exposed. I begin with a quote. In order to become the master, the politician poses as the servant. In order to become the master, the politician poses as the servant. Charles de Gaulle. Now, there's a lot of truth in that particular quote. At least in many instances, yes or no? Sure. Did you know that the Antichrist Beast of Revelation chapter 13 will pose as the servant in some way, shape, or form, but ultimately will become a very cruel master to planet Earth? Let's dig into this in Revelation chapter 13. Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. Revelation chapter 13 and verse 1. And it says here, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea, and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, upon his heads the name of blasphemy. And the beast which I saw," verse 2, "was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth is the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and seat and great authority." Verse 3, "And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast." Verse 4, "And they worshipped the dragon which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him?" And it says here in verse 5, "And he was given a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and he was given authority to continue for 42 months, or 3.5 years, 42 months. Now, as we dig into this particular prophecy, well, I want you to notice something that is very, very important. And that is that the Antichrist Beast, right off the bat, for those of us who are Bible students, we might notice that he is counterfeiting the ministry of Jesus Christ. Allow me to recap for you just briefly and review just a bit. He rises up out of the water. Is that what it says? It says the beast comes up out of the waters, out of the sea. Jesus began his ministry by rising up out of the water, yes or no? The event, it starts with a B. The letter, the word does, is his what? What is that event? His baptism. And then he had a ministry that lasted 42 months, or 3.5 years, yes or no? At the end of which he died on the cross. He received a deadly wound. But on Sunday morning, my friends, that wound was healed. He came forth from the tomb, a risen and living Savior. Amen? Wow! All the while, Jesus' ministry was about reconciling men to God by forgiving sin. And all the while, Jesus, his divinity, he claimed to be equal with the Father. He said, "I and my Father are one." But then it says in John 10, 30 to 33, that the Jews took up stones again to stone him. He said, "For a good work." He said, "What good work have I done that you should stone me?" They said, "For a good work we stone thee not, but for blasphemy, and that thou being a man maketh thyself God." You say, "Why are you going there?" Well, Jesus wasn't speaking blasphemy, but this power speaks blasphemy in Revelation 13. It has a blasphemous name. It would speak blasphemy. Here is the point, my friends. This power would claim to stand in the place of God or be equal with God. Blasphemy is when a man takes upon themselves the prerogatives of God. There was another time Jesus was accused of speaking blasphemy. And in Mark 2, 5 through 7, there was a man who was sick with palsy, and Jesus healed him, and he said, "Thy sins be forgiven thee." And they accused him of blasphemy, saying, "Who can forgive sins but who? God only." My friends, when you come to Revelation 13, you find this counterfeit religious power. It comes up out of the water, like Jesus did to begin his ministry. It rules for 42 months or 3.5 years, as Jesus had a ministry of that length. It receives a deadly wound. Jesus died on the cross for my sins and yours. Then this power, the wound is healed. Jesus was resurrected. All the while, Jesus was equal with the Father, claimed to stand in the place of God, and had the power to forgive sins, and this power too would speak blasphemy. This is amazing. You have a counterfeit ministry right here. We find it in this passage. Now, I also want you to notice a few key points about the Antichrist beast. One is it has worldwide influence. In verse 3, it says, "All the world wondered after the beast." Yes or no? 2, it's a religious power. Verse 4, it says they worshiped the beast. And point 3, it speaks blasphemy, and that's when a man claims to stand in the place of who? God, or when a man claims to have the power to forgive what? Sins. John 10, 30 to 33, and Mark 2, 5 through 7, sure, respectively on that. Now, this beast arises up out of the waters. What are waters in Bible prophecy? We've covered that in a previous lesson. Revelation 17:15, the waters are multitudes, peoples, nations, and tongues. Revelation 17:15. So the Bible interprets itself. You've got a beast rising up out of the waters, and the waters are multitudes, peoples, nations, and tongues. So what is a beast? Well, with that, we've been to Daniel chapter 7, verse 17 and verse 23, and it makes it clear that a beast in Bible prophecy is a kingdom, a nation, a political entity, if you will, a political power. Now, with this in mind, we can continue on and see the fact that in Daniel 7, verses 2 and 3, and please turn to Daniel 7 with me. I won't take time to read every verse, but I hope you'll have your Bible out and follow along as I reference them and explain them to you, since this portion is just a review in our message today. I won't take time to read each verse. We've done that previously. We look here in Daniel 7, okay? In Daniel 7, 2 and 3, and it says that Daniel stood upon the shores of the great sea, and he saw 4 beasts rising up out of the sea, diverse or different from each other. 4 beasts rising up. Now this becomes significant because the Antichrist beast of Revelation 13, let's look at the screen briefly. This beast had 7 heads and 10 horns, the body of a leopard, and the feet of a bear. Going to Daniel 7, we find the 4 beasts that the Antichrist beast is made up of. A lion with eagle's wings, a bear raised up on one side with 3 ribs in his mouth, a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings, and then a terrible, nondescript beast with iron teeth and 10 horns. And so, as we look here, we first need to notice that not only is the Antichrist beast made up of these 4 beasts, but these 4 beasts parallel something else in Daniel chapter 2. We studied about this man of metal and mud, and how that these different metals represented 4 world-dominating kingdoms of antiquity: Babylon, Medo-Persia, Greece, and Rome. And the 4 beasts of Daniel chapter 7 parallel those exactly. In Daniel 7 and verse 4, you have a lion with eagle's wings. That represents Babylon, ruling from 605 BC to 539 BC. And then Medo-Persia. You find in Daniel 7 and verse 5, the bear raised up on one side with 3 ribs in his mouth. The 3 ribs representing the 3 provinces of Babylonia, Lydia, and Egypt, as it devoured and, of course, conquered the known world at that time, or dominated that part of the world. It was raised up on one side because the Persians were so much stronger than the Medes. Just as my right arm might be a little larger and, well, more defined than my left arm, but this was a noticeable difference. The bear raised up on one side. In Daniel 7 and verse 6, it describes then a leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings. And this leopard with 4 heads and 4 wings would represent the power of Greece, as Greece conquered the world very quickly. But then Alexander the Great died, and his kingdom was temporarily divided among his four top generals, thus the four heads on the leopard. To the north went Lysimachus, to the south Ptolemy, to the east Seleucus, and to the west Cassander. And of course, it had four wings. Habakkuk 1 and verse 8 tell us wings denote speed in Bible prophecy. And then you come to the fourth beast, and that is Rome. In Daniel 7 in verse 8 and 7, it has here this beast with the iron teeth and the 10 horns. And then we see in verse 23, let's read it there. Daniel 7 in verse 23, thus he said, the fourth beast shall be a fourth kingdom on the earth, which shall be different from all other kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, trample it and break it in pieces. My friends, history reveals that the fourth world-dominating kingdom was none other than Rome, and that's who we're talking about. This beast represented Rome. A beast in Bible prophecy represents a kingdom. Rome ruled from 168 BC to 476 AD when Rome fell. And after Rome fell, a little horn, which would be the same as the Antichrist power of Revelation 13, would eventually emerge on the world scene. So, the 10 horns. This beast had 10 horns, and they are the parallel the 10 toes on the image, the statue in Daniel chapter 2. It says this, Daniel 7 verse 24, the 10 horns are 10 kings who shall arise from this kingdom, and another shall rise after them, and he shall be different from the first ones, and he shall subdue 3 kings. So this one will arise and subdue 3. Then it says, he shall speak pompous words against the Most High, shall persecute the saints of the Most High, and shall intend to change times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time and times and half a time. Now let's unpack that just a little bit. Pay attention to all that. He's going to dominate for a time and half a time. He's going to think he could change the law. He's going to speak great words or blasphemous words, pompous words against God, all right? And he's also going to persecute the saints. Now, with this in mind, we're talking about 10 horns before this little horn arises. This fourth beast has 10 horns. The little horn would arise from among them. Now, these 10 kingdoms, when Rome divided, it divided into 10 major divisions. There were some smaller groups, but 10 major divisions. The Anglo-Saxons, the Franks, the Alemanni, the Lombards, the Ostrogoths, the Heruli, the Vandals, there at the bottom. Back up to the center, the Burgundians. To the left, the Visigoths and the Suevi. Now, as we look here, we put those into modern English for you. The Alemanni are the Germans, the Burgundians the Swiss, the Franks the French, the Lombards the Italians, the Saxons the English, the Suevi the Portuguese, the Visigoths the Spanish, the Heruli the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths are now extinct. Now we look here in Daniel 7 and verse 8. Daniel 7 and verse 8, it says this, I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots, and there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words, great words, blasphemous words. Who or what is this little horn power that would arise out of these nations of Western Europe? We must be careful in identifying it, for it's none other than the Antichrist Beast of Revelation chapter 13. There are 11 points that we're going to cover quickly to identify this power. It has worldwide influence. We already saw that in Revelation 13:3, all the world wonders after the beast. It's a religious power. Revelation 13:4, we already saw that. People will worship this power. It arises among the other 10 nations of Western Europe. We just saw that in Daniel 7 and verse 8. It arises among them. It has a visible man in its head, a mouth speaking great things. That's right. It speaks blasphemy, which is when a man claims to stand in the place of who? Or claims to have the power to forgive. When a man claims to stand in the place of God or claims to have the power to forgive sins. That's right. It would pluck up 3 of the kingdoms. That's right. We also see that it would arise after the fall of Rome. In 476 AD, Rome must fall for this kingdom to rise. It would be diverse or different than all the other kingdoms, Daniel 7:24, which we read a moment ago. It would persecute the saints, also found there in Daniel 7:24 and 25. Along with it, would think it could change God's times and laws. No one could change God's law, but more on that later. And then would rule for 1,260 days. Now, as we look here, you find that it says time, and half a time, or dividing of time. A time was one Jewish year of 360 days. I know we have 365 days on today's calendar, but the biblical calendar had 360 days. Then 2 times, that's plural, that's 2 years, or 720 days. And then a half a time, or a half a year, would be 180 days, for a total of 1,260 days. Now, what does a day represent in Bible prophecy? Numbers 14:34 and Ezekiel 4 and verse 6 both tell us that a day in Bible prophecy represents a year. That's right. In fact, it says, I've given thee each day for a year. So 1,260 days becomes 1,260 what? Years. This is only in Bible prophecy. I don't have time to fully expound upon this right now, but if you've ever heard of something like a 7-year tribulation, that's people applying the year for day principle to get that, and we'll study that one perhaps at another time. Now, as we move along here, you've got this power that has worldwide influence. It's a religious power. It arises out of Western Europe. It has a man at its head. It speaks blasphemy. It plucks up 3 horns. It arises after 476 AD. It's diverse or different from all kingdoms. It would persecute and war against God's people. It would seek to change times and laws, and it would rule for 1,260 days or what? Years. That's right. Ezekiel 4:6 and Numbers 14:34. Now, I know that there are people here that in some way, shape, or form may be associated with this power. That does not make us bad people. You know, as we think about history, how many of you are Americans here? Oh, yeah? Well, if not, welcome aboard. Well, no, that's a controversial issue these days, isn't it? But think about this. Think about this. Are there things that America has done in its past or currently does do that as a Christian American one might be ashamed of? What about slavery in the past or attempted genocide on the Native American people, which the government actually, was trying to wipe out the Indian population at one point, yes or no? Sure. Oh, what about the homosexual marriages taking place in America today? These are things that I, as a Christian American, do not believe are biblical or right. But does that make me a bad American? Does that make you a bad American? Be careful, because you're in the same boat, yes or no? Same thing with this power. And sometimes the truth hurts, but error hurts far worse in the long run. Remember, both Babylon and Rome were beast in Bible prophecy, but God had people in each of those kingdoms that loved Him, yes or no? Same with this particular beast as well. So we're not talking about people that love Jesus. No, not at all. We're talking about a system, a power in prophecy. There are people in each of these beasts that loved God and followed Him faithfully. With this in mind, we review our top 5 points. Put number 6 through 11 on a hook in your mind, and we'll come back to those. Because unless you're both a theologian and a historian, you would not be familiar with all of those, numbers 6 through 11. So let's just focus on 1 through 5. This power would have worldwide influence. It would be a religious power. So we're talking about a worldwide religious power that would arise out of Western Europe. Number 3 arises among them. A worldwide religious power out of Western Europe. Then, that he would have a man in its head. A worldwide religious power out of Western Europe with a visible man in its head. And this power would in some way speak blasphemy, which is when a man claims to stand in the place of who? God, or when a man claims to have the power to forgive sins. Worldwide religious power out of Western Europe with a visible man in its head who would speak blasphemy. Now, you can compare all of this around the world, and you'll find only one power who ever has or ever could meet all of these points. And my friends, that is Vatican City. That's right. You say, he's picking on my church. No, I'm not. I'm revealing a prophecy from the Bible, and yes, it may be challenging, but I implore you to examine the evidence, because, my friends, this power would so closely mirror the ministry of Jesus that it may be almost imperceptible at times. Remember, the beast would come up out of the water, like Jesus did at His baptism, would have a rule of the same length of time that Jesus' ministry was, that it would receive a deadly wound, that it would, all of these symbols point forward to a religious power that would counterfeit or stand in the place of or usurp, which is what the word Antichrist in the Greek means, the ministry of Jesus. Let me show you just a few quotes very quickly. Notice what Martin Luther said as the Protestant Reformation began. He claimed, the Pope is the Antichrist, here where? On earth. Notice what John Wesley, founder of the original Methodist Church, said. He said of the Beast of Revelation 13 in his notes on the New Testament, this beast is the what? Roman papacy. Notice here the Baptist Confession of 1688. I have a Baptist background myself. Neither can the Pope of Rome in any sense be head thereof, but is no other than what? Antichrist, that man of sin and son of perdition. As we look here, you also can examine these points. Here's you one. Does this power speak blasphemy? These are the words written of John Paul II. This book was on sale all over the world right after the passing of John Paul II. And page 3, which is being quoted here, is the first page with writing by the author after the foreword. And here's what he said at the bottom of the first page of the book. The leader of the Catholic Church is defined by the faith as the vicar, which the word vicar means substitute for one who takes the place of. The vicar of Jesus Christ, and is accepted as such by believers. The Pope is considered the man on earth who takes the place of the second person of the omnipotent God of the Trinity. Referencing takes the place of the second person of the omnipotent God of the Trinity. Who's that a reference to? To Jesus. Okay. Now we move ahead here. Notice this quote. The Pope is not only the representative of Jesus Christ, but is Jesus Christ himself hidden under the veil of flesh, the Catholic National, July 1895. Does this power have someone that in some way, shape, or form at times claims to stand in the place of God? Yes or no? Well, my friends, just claiming to have the power to forgive sins is to do that. Does this power claim to have the power to forgive sin? The Catholic Encyclopedia says this judicial authority will even include the power to do what? Forgive sins. And so there it is. Very clear, very simple. As we look here at these points, notice point 6 plucks up 3 horns. As the papacy began to rise to power, there were 3 Aryan tribes that stood in its way that were obliterated in history, and those are the Heruli, the Vandals, and the Ostrogoths. They no longer exist. The only thing left from them is Vandalism. You don't ever want to become an ism, by the way. That's not very good. They were known for their senseless acts of destruction. Hence, if you go out and commit senseless acts of destruction today, you will be accused of what? Vandalism. That's right. Now, they became an ism. Don't become an ism. As we move ahead here, we see those 3 powers gone. Yes, it meets that succinctly. Now, we find here that it would arise after 476 AD. My friends, the papacy received full power and began to reign not just as a religious power, but a political power as well, when Belisarius came to Rome in 538 AD to drive out the Goths, the Ostrogoths, who had sacked Rome, and left the Pope in charge, not only as the religious leader, but now the military and political leader to defend Rome in the future. That wasn't a huge event in history, but my friends, if a little horn arises, you wouldn't expect it to be a big event for a little horn, would you? But later that horn would grow and would become very, very significant. It would be diverse or different, number 8, than all the other kingdoms. Yes, it's a 110-acre nation, my friends, right there in the heart of Rome. It's the only nation that exists solely and only for the purpose of religion. We have ambassadors to the Vatican, but right here in our part of the country, there are Americans that own more property than what the Vatican sits on. That's amazing. Now, also would persecute the saints. You can read about that in books like Fox's Book of Martyrs by John Fox, History of the Reformation by D.W. Ney, and Short Stories of the Reformation by, you guessed it, Short. And of course, you can study these things out and see. And yes, they admit to the killing of 50 million people for the crime of heresy during the Dark Ages. We also saw that this power would rule for 1,260 years. It received power in 538. In the year 1798, 1,260 years later, General Berthier, spelled Berthier, was sent by Napoleon Bonaparte and removed Pope Pius VI off the throne, took him to Valence, France, where there he died in a dungeon, thus a deadly wound to one of its heads. And people thought that the papacy would cease to exist and become a footnote in history. But no, my friends, after many, many, many years, slowly the wound would be healed, and this power would come and rise again. Now, with all of these points there's one other. Do you remember Revelation 13? And it mentions that there will be a beast, and this beast, it talks about the mark of the beast, and then it says, though, that the beast has a number. And it's the number of a man, and his number is what? 666, or, say it for me, 666. How does this fit together? How does it all tie together? You've got this beast power with the number 666. It's not specifically there, if you read it carefully, called the mark of the beast. It mentions the mark of the beast, but it says it's the number of the beast. It's the number of a man, and his number is 666. And so exactly how does that tie in with this prophecy right here? Well, we're out of time for today. But we will be getting into that one coming up very, very soon. As we do so, I would like to share with you that Bible prophecy, in our closing seconds, has revealed a system that would stand in God's place. My friends, it would misrepresent God, and that's why it's so serious. You realize down through the dark ages, as people were persecuted and were not allowed religious freedom, and as people were martyred, that this system, more so than any other, has branded what God is like for our world today, and it's a wrong picture of who God is. What I'm here to tell you today, my friends, is our God is not the way He's been portrayed down through history by the Vatican. No, my friends, we serve a good God, a loving God, not a God of torture, not a God of authoritarian dogma, but a God of freedom of choice and freedom of conscience, a God who loves you, a God who made a sinless world, not through theistic evolution, as the Vatican teaches, but by biblical creation. And that world was defiled only by man's choice to enter into sin, but God will make it right. God will set it right. And once again, sin will be obliterated out of this universe, my friends, as God will set up His kingdom very soon. And right now, we have opportunity to be making intelligent choices and heartfelt choices as to which side we will be on when the final events of Earth's history come to a halt. So why don't you halt just right now and commit to be ready in that day to meet Him by inviting Him into your heart.
Thank you for watching our program today. I would like to invite you to come and hear me speak live at the Columbia Seventh-day Adventist Church, located at 1100 College Park Drive, Columbia, Missouri. Also, if you would like a free DVD or study guide of today's program, call 573-340-3998. You can also go to our website, studyrevelation.com, to request DVDs or study guides, or to watch these programs at your own pace.
In shady green pastures, so rich and so sweet, God leads His dear children along. Where the water's cool flow bathes the weary one's feet, God leads His dear children along. Some through the water, some through the flood, some through the fire, but all through the blood. Some through great sorrow, but God gives a song in the night seasons and all the day long. Why should I feel discouraged? Why should the shadows come? Why should my heart be